What is the difference between a good presentation and a great one? One that touches our hearts and changes our mind. And why is this even important? Well, loads of professions require us to be good communicators and to share our ideas. It's likely that throughout your career, you'll be asked to give a presentation as well. In order to give a great presentation, it's important to understand two key principles: storytelling and brain-to-brain coupling. Stories help us to connect with our audience on a personal and emotional level, and brain scans show that stories actually stimulate and engage the human brain. But in order to understand why stories are so impactful, it's important to comprehend the effect that stories have on our brains. Yuri Hansen refers to this effect as brain-to-brain coupling. Hassan has discovered that stories actually cause the storyteller and the listener's brains to sync up. Take a look at this clip of Hassan explaining this in greater detail.
So over you can see 5 listeners. And we start to scan their brains before the story is starting, when they simply lie in the dark and waiting for the story to begin. And as you can see, the brain area is going up and down in each one of them, but the responses are very different and not in sync. However, immediately as the story is starting, something amazing is happening.
So I'm banging out my story and I know it's good. And then I start to make it.
Suddenly you can see that the responses in all of the subjects going locked to the story, and now they are going up and down in a very similar way across all listeners. And in fact, this is exactly what's happening now in your brains when you listen to my sound speaking.
Wow, everyone involved is connected by the story that's being shared. The storyteller is captivating the audience and literally planting ideas and emotions in their brain. So now that you understand how storytelling affects the brain, how does storytelling allow us to connect with our audience on a personal level? Well, narratives provide a relatable human connection, allowing presenters to share their experiences, challenges, and successes, creating a connection with the audience. Now let's take a look at this clip of Brian Stevenson sharing a story with the audience at his TED Talk.
So I want to talk about the power of identity. And I didn't learn about this actually practicing law and doing the work that I do. I actually learned about this from my grandmother. I grew up in a house that was the traditional African-American home that was dominated by a matriarch, and that matriarch was my grandmother. She was tough, she was strong, she was powerful. She was the end of every argument in our family. She was the beginning of a lot of arguments in our family. She was the daughter of people who were actually enslaved. Her parents were born in slavery in Virginia in the 1840s. She was born in the 1880s, and the experience of slavery very much shaped the way she saw the world. My grandmother was tough, but she was also loving. When I would see her as a little boy, she'd come up to me and she'd give me these hugs, and she'd squeeze me so tight I could barely breathe. And then she'd let me go. And an hour or two later, if I saw her, she'd come over to me and she'd say, "Brian, do you still feel me hugging you?" And if I said no, she'd assault me again. And if I'd say yes, she'd leave me alone. And she just had this quality that you always wanted to be near her.
Stevenson was reaching their minds, but he could only do that after he had touched their hearts. Brian Stevenson's presentation received the longest standing ovation in TED Talk history, and for 65% of his speech, he shared personal stories with his audience. Even though his TED Talk was about identity and injustice, before he shared any facts, he connected with his audience on a personal level through story. Plenty of organizations have been known to adopt this method as well. Have you ever seen a St. Jude's Children's Hospital commercial?
David? Well, he's a real ham. He's very bright, fully bilingual.
Spanish, English, Chinese. Just kidding, no Chinese.
He loves people, he's very social. He can meet a friend anywhere. He's a very loving boy.
When we tell stories, we're capable of reaching people's hearts and their mind. Stories are impactful. It's no wonder why some of the best TED Talk presenters and organizations like St. Jude share stories to invoke emotions and to persuade their audience, because stories help us to connect on a personal level. So the next time you have a presentation to give, consider being a great presenter. Share a story that resonates with your audience, captivates them, and persuades them to believe what you believe.